Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining another episode of the Plant-Free MD. I'm Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Gary Fettke, who is a longtime advocate and proponent of a low-carb lifestyle for health and as well as incorporating in medicine, medical practice. Dr. Fettke, thank you so much for joining us.
Anthony, my pleasure.
Right. So for people who haven't come across...
We're doctor to doctor. I mean, you can call me Gary, so I'm going to call you Anthony.
Perfect. Yeah.
Gary's a four-letter word, by the way.
Yeah, it is, especially in Australia. So, well, great. So for people that haven't come across your work and your videos online, of which there are many, I encourage people to go check them out, and your websites and YouTube channel. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your work in this area?
In summary, it's not that easy. I'm a fairly complicated character, but look, I'm a happily married father of what I call three seemingly normally adjusted children, grandfather of a couple more. Most of us are living a low-carb lifestyle and seeing the benefits of it. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, just sort of retired from my clinical practice, but still doing lots of activism, as you know. And for many, many years, I was in northern Tasmania, ended up being the focus of people with diabetic foot complications would come along. And I looked after a lot of deep infections, not just with diabetes, deep infected joint replacements. I was sort of the last stop. My clinics used to be called Fettke's F'd Up Fructose-Free Fungating Foot Folly Fridays. There's a lot of F's in there. Yeah. But essentially... like my registrars gave me a golden toilet brush one Christmas because I got to clean up all the mess, the stuff. So as a result of that, I've had a very interesting surgical career over 30 years. But when you actually see that the end complications, you can actually treat them with surgery, you can treat them with medications, you got all these other options. But this central role of nutrition was just completely missing. And the crunch point for me was a guy in his 40s that was looking at losing both of his legs from diabetes complications. I ended up losing one, but he's in hospital. I'm trying to control this, local sepsis in his limbs, and he's been given ice cream 3 times a day. I'm just going, hang on, well, stop. And someone stopped serving this guy ice cream. And then I was told, that's the guidelines. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And they're still there, actually, here in Australia. Mm-hmm. You actually start looking down the national health food, the national guidelines for hospital food, and you take it apart, you can be served ice cream 3 times a day, and in between for snacks, you're given chocolate biscuits, fruit juice, cake, morning tea, afternoon tea, and supper, on top of your 3 ice creams. Now, I'm not making that stuff up. I've actually presented that to the food industry. Mm. And they said, it can't be. I said, well, actually, these are your documents, A, B, C, D. So long and short of it, I said, I entered this nutrition field, A, for my own health reasons, but actually for my patients. And then it was started off as being a campaign against the issues of sugar, then the whole role of polyunsaturated oils, and then carbohydrates, which really means ultra-processed food particularly. But then when you start looking back at it, it means a whole lot of other staples in our diet. And so I started talking about it at the hospital. I got on this thing called the internet. Ever heard of it? It just creates trouble in your life. And within 24 hours, I was targeted by someone who was working with Coca-Cola. Because it's different if, as you know, if there's celebrity chefs or someone, and I've worked with a few over time, and they say something related to diet, they can be knocked down. But when a surgeon is sick and tired of amputating limbs, is saying exactly the same thing, it carries with it a bit more credibility. Maybe not popularity, but nonetheless credibility. And then, so it wasn't long, and long and short of it, I got reported to the medical board on 3 occasions. One for inappropriately reversing someone's type 2 diabetes on national TV. You're not allowed to do that. As it turns out, each time I was reported, we can track those back, even though we're not allowed to know it, but nonetheless, they were tracked back to dietitians who were working for Dietitians Australia. And in contractual agreements that were found by Belinda, the breakfast cereal industry here in Australia was contracting with the Dietitians Association here in Australia, using their members, all dietitians in Australia, to promote the benefits and protect the benefits of sugar and cereal. So the members didn't even know that. We've actually got the KPI documents, there's a whole lot there, and they've been presented to a Senate inquiry. The long and short of it is we've got the food industry complicitly promoting sugar and carbs to the population. And more, as importantly, those people who are speaking against it were named for targeting. There were 7 people on that list in the documents that we had, and I was the only Australian doctor on that list for targeting. And then it turns out, ultimately, took 4.5, 5 years out of my lifetime expenses and all that sort of thing. Belinda's done an enormous amount of research related to that. And ultimately, my name was cleared and I received an apology from the medical board. And that was critical because my story was very much like that of Tim Noakes over in South Africa, Annika Dahlqvist in Sweden. And as it turns out, we're all being reported by dietitians, and Belinda's actually found them, those 3 dietitians, across international borders at an international meeting having a little hug. So, and the same playbook that occurred with myself has subsequently happened with other doctors here in Australia talking about low-carb nutrition. And each time we've been able to come back to my case or Tim's case in these other countries, and they've all been thrown out. Because effectively we're talking about science. As you know, we're not talking about nutritional science, which has been made up by the food industry for over 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm no angel, but I was innocent of all those. But it's about playing hardball with your own health, and hardball is once you work it out for yourself and your family, you can't not take that into the workplace.
Yeah.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor at Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Not in the games we're in. Can't not.
Yeah, definitely. And especially in your line of work, dealing with people with very serious complications of diabetes in particular, something that is so clearly related to food. And you're dealing with people that are losing limbs, losing more than their limbs, probably losing kidney function, the eyesight, and cardiovascular illnesses.
Well, diabetes affects every corner of the body.
Yeah.
When it's poorly controlled. I mean, our Minister of Health, for instance, we had a meeting with him one day, and he said, yeah, look, he and his family have given up all sugar, but we can't do that for the community. So, yeah, we've got, these are the barriers to our messaging is not the science. The barriers are the vested interests. And I think the biggest barrier going forward, and I don't know if you've come across this, is the egos of health professionals that have to admit they got it wrong. And it's a childlike thing. If you've got kids, they make a mistake, say, look, hang on, guys, you've made a mistake, say sorry, and we'll all move ahead. And the fact that because I've been, as you said, I've been doing this for a long time, we're still having this infantile discussion with National Health and Medical Research Council, NHMRC. We're still having it with Diabetes Australia, Cancer Council, Heart Foundation. They're all sort of saying, oh, no, this is what the literature shows. No, the literature you get has actually been completely written by vested interests who are not interested in actually making people better. They're interested in making a profit. Now, I'm going to say it out loud. I mean, and if anybody wants the proof of it, it's there. You just got to go looking for it. And that's but as individuals, people can make those health decisions themselves. Don't have to wait for your doctor. You don't have to wait for don't wait for the food pyramid to change, or the food guidelines, because it's going to be more of the same, even though there's a review underway at the moment.
Well, that's
I can't stop ranting. Sorry about that.
No, no, you're fine. Because the thing is, I totally agree with you, and I think that's really the only way that we can move forward is we have to get this as a grassroots movement. We have to get enough people understanding of this, and enough doctors like yourself speaking about this and teaching other doctors and bringing them around, because people do have good intentions. Like we were talking before this, how we both have no problems with vegans. We actually like vegans. Their intentions are exactly in the right place. We would share most of them, if not all of them. It's just that they've been taken in by misinformation, or we see a problem and we've decided to say, well, we think this is a better solution to that problem, but we still recognize it as the same problem. And there are a lot of doctors that are trying to do the same. They're trying to help their patients, heal their patients in the best way possible. It's just that what they were taught in medical school in their specialty isn't necessarily in that regard going to be exactly the right thing, certainly to do with nutrition. And so, just getting more and more people aware of that, because it's not going to come from top down, until there's 34% of the population out there demanding something different. The powers in charge aren't going to start listening. So we have to do this.
I agree in principle, but I've also got to have a little hope that we can create a bit of a top-down approach a bit quicker than the 34%.
Hopefully.
I know of several federal politicians across different parties who are all low-carbing.
Yeah, right. Very good.
And I said, I need you guys to all sit down in Parliament House and have a steak together. Literally just sit down and have a meal together and start discussing, and forget and some of them are complete odds with each other across the floor. But you've actually got one thing in common. You've all actually improved your health. Mm-hmm. There's two vegans that have actually switched over to being carnivore. You go, okay, and this is here in Australian politics, you can have a chat to Esteemed Malhotra about some, inside information on what's happening in the UK Parliament. But, we're not alone. We just need them to stand up.
Yeah.
There's a great thing called about committed sardines. Have you heard about them?
No, I don't think so.
So committed sardines is when a school of fish can just turn around.
Right.
Just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this will come into the vegan argument because it's an interesting point. So at any point in time, there are fish swimming in different directions on the outside, a bit more agitated, a bit trying to not being more aware of what's going on around them. And when 3% of them turn, they can turn the whole school. So a whale the same size of that school of fish will take a minute or two to actually do a 180 degrees. So the big monoliths, and we can extrapolate the parallels are there to whatever you want, struggle to turn around, but the fish can actually turn around very quickly. And so what's the percentage you need to turn them around? It's not 50%. It's not 34%. The actual ecological term is actually 3%. Mm-hmm. So when 3% of the school turn around, and there are different ways of considering that. There are other changes, then you've got the early adopters and the late adopters, and different ways you think about it mathematically. So if you get 3% of the population around on board with this, then you're winning. Mm-hmm. Hitler, I think, won with 9% of the vote.
Yeah,
literally. Okay, shot his major competition, but it literally went around that quickly. So I'm interested in that figure of 3% because we constantly hear in mainstream media, 3% of the population are vegan. Mm. I don't think that's right. There might be 3% who have tried vegan or have tried being vegan food,
right? But
I don't think it's 3%. But the vegans keep saying 3%. And I actually think that they want to keep saying, okay, with 3%, we can turn it all around.
Right.
And so, look, here in Australia, I know we're already winning because you can buy low-carb beer at the pub. You go to the bottle shop, they've got 5, I think I'm up to about 8 different types of low-carb beer that you can actually buy. So the market's already responding to what the population want. We can talk about how alcohol stops you losing weight. Now, there's some really interesting biochemistry there. But politically, there's some win there. I've put in my talks there, I found there's 3, Women's Weekly have 3 low-carb cookbooks. So when Women's Weekly, and last week I found a keto one from Women's Weekly. got a photo, I'll send it to you. I say, hey, I found Women's Week are now up to 4 cookbooks. Oh my God, that's incredibly dangerous. The CSIRO have, their low carb, their books on how to turn that around, which is interesting. When that CSIRO came out with all of that, 18 months before that, one of the authors of that was in our lounge room. We're having a chat about how you can turn low carb into turning around diabetes. But at the same time, I'm being smashed underneath the bus, and CSIRO get, up on this pinnacle because they've, come up with low carb management. I think we're winning, and I think that's partly population based. So it's largely population based. It's actually some freedom of press in social media. Mm-hmm. Oh, you look great. What are you doing? That sort of thing. I'm feeling better. What are you doing? That sort of thing. The big institutions are starting to soften, particularly Diabetes Australia, other diabetes associations around it. They have to soften because that's the lowest hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. Drop your sugar, drop your carbs, drop your processed food. You're going to improve your diabetes outcome overnight. That's it.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do low carb, and particularly if they go that evolution of low carb, a lot of people are eating the it's what they call, the standard Australian, standard American crap diet, and they get sick. Well, I think you've seen those figures. Latest data out of the US is 93.2% of the population are metabolically unwell, mm-hmm. which means the dietary guidelines, which are promoted by governments, are completely not required because they're for guides for healthy eating for healthy people. Mm-hmm. So you can toss the dietary guidelines out the window. We should actually come out with guidelines for unwell people, becoming condition-specific: diabetes, heart, cancer, renal disease. Guess what? They all end up being LCHF, low-carb, keto, carnivore. But I call that a transition. So people are eating the crap diet, they get sick, then they go and eat the food pyramid diet. And I've got a statement there saying there where if you eat by the food pyramid, you're going to die by the food pyramid, and along the way you're going to look like it, which is fairly accurate. And then you've got people who then move off. Some people who go and work out real food, like LCHF, and then you've got another group that go towards vegan, both with an interest in their health, the planet, and all that sort of thing. Ultimately, that vegan diet, being plant-based, will be deficient in macronutrients, the proteins you require, the healthy fats, and it will be deficient in micronutrients, minerals, vitamins, stuff that you've been talking about well and truly. So they come back to LCHF, and then you've got a group that for other health reasons go to carnivore, go to keto, and then a group that go to carnivore. So you can't, if you really want to go hardcore keto for health reasons, you can't do that on plant-based foods. It has to be animal-based. And because animal-based, we're just animals, and animal-based diet will be complete in healthy proteins, but complete across all the board and all the proteins you require, all the healthy fats, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals. It's just there.
Yeah. And the and the thing is too that when you do know that, you can't unknow it. And so as a doctor, it's you're obligated to tell your patients that. And when you walk through the halls of the hospital and you see every single meal and snack is high sugar carbs, it's just sugary carbs all the time, you can't not say anything. I feel the same way. So I think you're right. It's interesting that you say that about the 3%, because I do hear that all the time, that sort of 3% of people are vegan or vegetarian or something like that. Mm. But like you say, it's probably just people who have tried it, because there was a figure, I forget who published it, but it was a study that looked at recidivism of vegan.
Oh, yes.
It was like 84% will come off of it, usually for health reasons. That was the most commonly cited reason on that survey was for health reasons. Their health suffered as a result of it. So 84%.
I think the benefits of vegan and vegetarian lifestyles have been overstated. Mm. And the biggest quote, and this is a lot of Belinda's work, I've got to drift on there and give her the credit for it, but when you realise that the vast majority of literature supporting vegan and vegetarianism actually comes from the Adventist health studies, and they've been quoted over and over and over again, they requote each other, so they get lots and lots of citations. So the one paper I found cited by other papers from the same group was 400 odd times per study. So literally, I'll write a paper and then I'll requote it, and then you end up with all these citations, and they get requoted all the time. So it's really interesting to look at the Seventh-day Adventist studies and their definitions of vegan and vegetarianism. So vegetarianism can allow for, we can tell you, I'm actually a vegetarian, by the way. So I just supplement with a few things. I'm a carno, ovo, lacto, pesco, pollo vegetarian.
Yeah.
So I supplement with meat, chicken, eggs, dairy, pork and fish. So Belinda's actually done an anthem to that. That's another thing we can find on YouTube. Yeah. The low-carb anthem.
I did see that. Yeah.
So that came up on a flight to the US. She just laughed at me when I said, look, I'm a vegetarian. She said, what the hell are you on about this time? And I've actually used that argument because I found a group of vegans, activists, assaulting a 14-year-old kid at a little animal farm. They were just completely ganging up with it. And I went in there with open arms. I said, come on, guys, look, I'm a vegetarian. But I'm not hassling this 14-year-old who's tending a calf and the animal. I said, but I didn't actually tell them my supplement.
Or what you supplement with.
Yeah. It was, but I mean, that's a huge issue there. Anyway, so the definitions of vegetarianism, as used by the Adventist Church, is that you don't eat meat more than once a week. Okay, so hang on, you can eat it every 8 days and you're still classified as a vegetarian. You can eat animal-based food every 8th day and you'll be fine. And the definition of vegan in the Adventist health studies was that you don't eat meat more than once a month. So hang on, we've just and so yes, if you're going to be having some liver pate on the 31st day, then you're going to get probably just enough micronutrients to get by. Or if you eat, 4 kilos of steak on the 31st day, I mean, I'm obviously, exaggerating. But, so the biggest studies in the world, which are actually, the hallmark behind all of this is actually written by an organisation which is actually, it runs 14 different processed food industries, has a religious ideology slant, but their literature is completely flawed by their data. It's just fascinating to find, it's called looking at methodology. Don't just look at the conclusion. Don't even look at, read the abstract. You've got to look at the methodology. When you actually drag the methodology out and you find out, things like the blue zones, which side that's, agenda for the plant-based diet. Well, the blue zones actually only became marketable after they included Loma Linda in the US, which is Seventh-day Adventist. Then they commercialised it all, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church has now bought the patents on blue zones. So the term blue zones, and communities want to become blue zones, at a rough cost of about $500,000 to $1 million per county, per shire, per area in the US. And they've signed up hundreds and hundreds of places to actually become a blue zone county. In Texas, if you as a community, if you want to farm beef, you've actually got to give money to the blue zones. This is absolutely crazy. I mean, it can only happen in the US. No, it's happening right around Australia, right around the world, that this blue zones thing it's all about the benefits of a plant-based food. We actually take each one of those cultures apart. They all ate fresh, local, seasonal, whole food with a good cultural environment. And they were eating their local fish or their local pork, and they were having their geese and their animal-based product in there. So it's just a complete myth that's actually been taken over by a market, by a food industry, church ideology, and it's just a major market force. Yeah. And they're becoming the educators of lifestyle medicine in the US and around the world. Yeah. And when you hear the term lifestyle medicine, okay, that's actually church organisation running a vegan agenda, and all their textbooks and all their exams are all promoting veganism. But they don't. And that's the frustration. It's not biochemistry. It's not the Krebs cycle. Mm-hmm. It's politics, power, and money and religious ideology. I didn't mean to find all this stuff out. And I'm actually they're very, very clever. They've done a great job. Been working at it for 100 years.
And staying very much behind the scenes and in the shadows,
Well, yes and no.
Well, as far as, I didn't know that they came up with the field of nutritional sciences and lifestyle medicine and things like that until I saw your and your wife's lectures on it.
Well, it's the very first meeting of dietitians. The formation of the American Dietitians Association was in October 22, 23, 1917, approximately. Okay. Hang on, 1923. And at that first meeting, with 6 weeks' notice, we can get it right, there's either 5 or 6 food industry groups were there advertising. So in fact, they just said, actually, this is important. We think we need to be here. Mm-hmm. And the founder of that, Leonard Cooper, had been working with John Harvey Kellogg for years. Mm-hmm. And John Harvey Kellogg, Seventh-day Adventist, founder of Kellogg's, and 101 cereal companies were founded in Battle Creek, Michigan, which is the home of the Adventist Church, and blah, 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 and it's just continued on. There's a multi-billion-dollar food industries now. They've branched out into a whole lot of other processed foods, and they've vertically integrated themselves from the farming practices into the thing, and actually into the pharmaceutical industry now. Mm. And guess what drugs are producing? Drugs to lower your blood glucose from the food that they've served. It's just, that's some of what they're doing. But it's just, it's a rabbit warren, but it's the same players that keep cropping up, or the same pathways that keep cropping up. And it's interesting, I'm using the term cropping. This is plant-based, isn't it? Not rising up, cropping up. It's the same playbook. It's been going for over 100 years. Mm. And it's, right through to the controlling of parliamentary inquiries or government inquiries in the US. Sugar's being bad for us has actually been well documented and known right from the outset. And back in the early 1900s, pathways to try and get it through government were done, but they've been blocked by Coca-Cola. And it's just, and the Centre of Disease Control in the US, CDC, you ever heard them say anything about sugar? Well, the land they actually started, the CDC, was granted to them by the president of the Coca-Cola Foundation. Okay. There's an ongoing tie with Coca-Cola and the sugar industry in the Centre of Disease Control. They're, one of the biggest arbitrators of, health advice in the world. And I've never heard them say anything bad about sugar. But you go back into history and you find that the buildings were given to the ground that they sit on was supplied to them by Coca-Cola.
Yeah, wow. And then, and that's something too. You and your wife Belinda have done really deep dives into this, and I encourage everyone to watch those YouTube videos and talks about the history of this. But for people that haven't come across that and don't really know the history behind all this, how did we get the dietary recommendations that we have now? Why is it that all the colleges of nutrition are saying everything should be plant-based, everything should be plant-based or vegan? I remember, I grew up in Kirkland, Washington. There's a college there, Bastyr, which has been, at least at the time, it was the top-rated nutritional graduate school in America, and it was just all about raw food veganism, just whole food plants, like that was it. That's everything they were pumping out of there. How did we get there? I mean, who started all this, and why do we have to listen to it?
1910, 1923. Okay, there's a thing called the Flexner Report, 1910, commissioned Carnegie and Rockefeller, who I actually found out only recently, they actually weren't getting along very well. Mm. But they commissioned Abraham Flexner and to pretty well got rid of holistic medicine at that point in time. And it became the birth of the pharmaceutical industry, and the concepts of to medicate and to operate were born, not to prevent. Mm. That's the one critical time frame. There's a talk of mine called The Failure of Medical Education on YouTube, which covers all this in a bit more detail. Then you've got the birth of the American Dietetics Association, 1923. Now, when you go, the long and short of it is, I call it historical education. You and I find it hard to challenge our teachers. And our teachers found it hard to challenge their teachers, and they're hard to challenge the textbooks. But if you go back in history, and particularly in dietetics, the original textbooks for dietetics nutrition were written by Leonard Cooper as a vegan. But we've actually got some of her textbooks from they're cheap as, you can pick them up for a few dollars, because I don't know how many they printed, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of this, as is the textbook of nutrition. And it's demonizing meat, and it's showing the benefits of plant-based product right from the word go. So the textbooks for dietetics, to this day, we had some dietitians who were working for us, a few years ago. I said, get out your textbooks. I'd give them to me first of all, and I went through the major textbook written by Mark Walquist, who was the guy who was the expert witness against me, has the terms meat in it 4 times, I think, in the version I've got. And one of them was hidden under protein sources. 2 were about mad cow disease, and the other one was about food poisoning. And so if you look under the chapters about protein, it talks about all these alternate proteins, but not meat, not animal-based. And so when you realise the textbooks for over 100 years have been plant-based, the dietitians believe it. The benefits of grains and legumes and fruits and vegetables are just, it's in the textbook. And the same thing in our textbooks, medical, surgical, they've been written by the industry promoting the product. Harrison's textbook of internal medicine, the last one I looked at, the editors of it in the previous year had received $12 million in consultancy fees from the pharmaceutical industry. And there's just no way. We've got one of the deans of medicine here in Australia, the gatekeeper of the education to the students, has received over $200,000 directly from the pharmaceutical industry in the last few years. Not for research. I've got problems with research in itself. People get funding for all of that. But he's getting its consultancy fees. What the hell is a dean of medicine? I'm not going to be sued because I'm being deliberately non-specific here, but you can find that out on the internet, on the information. And I've confronted him with it. I said, why are you blocking this message? Has it got something to do with the fact that you've received this information, this money? So when people say, but the textbooks say that, what's the messaging coming through? And we've been having these conversations at a national, international level with those, that's what the information says. Because unless you challenge the paradigm, that's the end of it. I mean, you've got an email from me at the bottom. It says science evolves by being challenged, not by being followed. That is the scientific method, just said in another way. And the more of this obstructive behaviour that we have, you're not allowed to challenge the professor or the textbook or the previous bit of information, or you and I have challenged that. You've got to do deep dives down other non-mainstream journals to find the science to back it all up. But we're being obstructed when all we're doing is our job, which is quality assurance, which is challenging the scientific. It is the scientific method. Mm-hmm. And I am deeply disturbed by what's gone on the last 15 years with all of this, that we're seeing the end of science. And I chat to the educators at the university. I say, what have we got this year, shepherds or sheep? The answer year in is sheep. Mm-hmm. And every year with my teaching, I went to great lengths to find one shepherd and then nurture that shepherd. And you'd like to think that the medical profession, the top marks at high school. And look, I'm delighted to say our 3 kids are too smart. None of them did medicine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only thing I can do about that is to keep raising the awareness. Yes, it is a road less travelled. It's a harder road to travel, but it's okay to challenge. And haven't given you a copy of a book I wrote some years ago, but essentially one of the final things is that only dead fish swim with the current. You ever think about that? So if you just want to keep meandering along, but you're truly alive, like a salmon swimming upstream, when you're fighting that current, you're working hard, but you're actually alive. And I'm just really, really concerned that there are a lot of dead fish out there.
Yeah.
Particularly in the medical field, and other ones which are our gatekeepers to our health.
Yeah. And, just thinking about what you said, sometimes it can be a strike to the ego when someone is challenged with the fact that they may have been hurting their patients for a number of years but I think that anybody who is responsible would look at that and go, well, geez, I don't want to hurt any more patients. I better look into this and make sure that I'm doing the right thing, or that I can do better.
Well, at a personal level, I was heading towards obese. I had health problems. I loved chocolate. Here's a big confession. I was the cake judge at the hospital. And I wouldn't take kids' plasters off unless they brought me a chocolate cake. Yeah. So they'd say, they'd come in and they'd say, oh, how long is the plaster on? I'd say, well, it's 6 weeks if you bring me a chocolate cake, and eight if you don't. So we literally Fridays at clinic used to end up with about, at times half a dozen chocolate cakes. And so, we'd share them around to the wards, and I always take the best one home. And I was 20 kilos heavier than what I am now. But so, these are confessions. I got it wrong. And I tell you what, it's a complete relief to be able to say, I got it wrong, let's move ahead. And those medicos, and I'm going to talk about those healthcare professionals in particular, that have said, I got it wrong and moved ahead. And the whole field's full of them now. I got it wrong was the most empowering moment for them to go on and make a difference. The last time the medical profession said they got it wrong publicly was thalidomide, the anti-nausea drug. And I think it's the figure of about 10,000 people were maimed as a result of thalidomide. Massive. However, when you compare it to the number of people maimed by the modern diet and the health consequences and just of diabetes and the amputations that are done on an annual basis, it makes thalidomide just nothing in the overall scheme of it. And that's such a powerful wave to be riding on at the moment for you, me, others in that space, because this is the best part of medicine ever, is making people better. By empowering them with information that they can do rather than you can do. Infinitely more power than the pen is mightier than the sword. And, we've got scalpels in our hands. And, that's powerful. But I can tell you what, I know that my social media reach is further every day than the number of people that I'd see in a lifetime of medicine. That says it all. And it's something I've got to be careful of, and I've got to be respectful of. But, your talks of, we're talking about, between us, millions of people have viewed those things over the years. And, we're contacted from around the world. And so that's a very great privilege that we have and share. But at the same time, I find it really hard to be respectful of the authorities who are still blocking a preventative health message. So if it's being blocked, that's where our work, that's where Belinda's work in particular and others are going, okay, why is it being blocked? Who's doing the blocking? And guess what? It's the same players over and over and over. Food industry, pharmaceutical industry, Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that's the big group. So just keep calling them out. Yeah. And because nobody knows where Tasmania is, we haven't been killed yet.
Yeah, that was a figure I heard earlier this year, was that just Coca-Cola and obviously, Nestle and Pepsi and certainly Kellogg's and Sanitarium Foods, which is the Seventh-day Adventist cereal company here in Australia. Just Coca-Cola spends 11 times the amount of money on nutritional research than the NIH every year. And that's just Coca-Cola. So you have to imagine that the large bulk of the nutritional studies and science, so-called, are obviously going to be favoring their products. And I remember from one of your talks, I can't remember the organization's name, but it was the exercise is medicine sort of.
Oh yeah, American College of not exercise, American College of Sports Medicine.
And weren't they founded by Coca-Cola?
Yeah, they originally started by Coca-Cola. It's called health washing your product. Who's the longest sponsor of the Olympic Games? Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Longest sponsor of FIFA. There's a World Cup coming up again. We come up with Coca-Cola. Thank goodness McDonald's got kicked out of the Olympics last round, was it? Something like that. Yeah. But again, this is health washing, and we've got Little Athletics here in Tasmania. I don't know about the rest of the company that's sponsored by the National Lolly Company. And Little Athletics, if you do well, you get a McDonald's voucher. And we need the sponsorship to keep going. No, what are we setting these kids up for? It's an ongoing. I call it whack-a-mole. That game. Okay, here, there it is. It's again. Okay. Haven't heard from a little bit. Oh, yeah. Okay, here they come, and it's just a constant battle, and that's why it's important to have discussions like this, even though we might be repeating ourselves. It is whack-a-mole. You've got to just keep it up, because someone says, no, that's, can I say bullshit? No, sorry, it's BS. It's just no. You have to have your essential grains. There's a professor, very highly placed professor of nutrition. He just reminded me to email him again. He came up and we were debating a topic. And he came up to me afterwards. He says, you can get all your B vitamins from complex, 50 grams of complex carbohydrate. And I said, hang on. I said, what about B12? He said, this is a classic eminence-based medicine. He said, Dr. Fettke, you're wrong. You can get all your B vitamins from 50 grams of grain, as a conversation panned out. So, I had to, in the heat of the moment, it's important not to have fisticuffs in a debate. And so I emailed him and I said, look, this is, I just sent him a couple of quick articles saying, that grains are deficient in B12. Let's just focus on the one thing. It's the biggest problem in a plant-based diet. And he just got, no, you can get it from 50 grams of grains, which is really important to have it in writing if I'm ever needed to state it. And I said, can you actually point me to an article where that's covered, or some piece of literature, some piece of biochemistry? Oh, that email was lost, by the way. Okay, so he didn't respond. So then because I'm not going to let that one go. Mm-hmm. And so this has been going on for 6 months. He still will not give me a reference to, but this is the guy, one of the guys, one of the two major players of this, giving nutritional advice in this country. And you just go, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. He's also been doing funded work with Sanitarium, okay, with the plant-based thing. So hang on. And I've called him out on that. And I don't win any friends, Anthony, okay? That's why I started off, so I'm very happily married with children and grandchildren, because that's...
Don't need any more.
Because sort out your own lot. And but here's an example of so much confusion, because I'm trying to look around for friends now. I was at the supermarket the other day, and there's a bloke that I play golf with, and he and his wife had just walked in, and they had in their trolley a bag of spuds, potatoes, and a loaf of bread. And I couldn't help it. I said, mate, you failed my shopping trolley test. Yeah. And his wife said, oh, this is the low-carb bread, next to a bag of potatoes.
Right.
And by the time they were spending time in the fruit and veg section, and I was just getting some meat, okay, all right, I'm guilty. It wasn't from the butcher, but it was after hours we needed some meat and butter. So I've gone out with my meat and butter and a container of cream, okay, I'm guilty, all right. People look at me like I'm going to have a heart attack on, 2 legs, or
you're
one leg.
Way out to the car, yeah.
Yeah. Are you hopping in the hearse? No. Anyway, And I just went, and she said she's trying to do low carb, and her husband said, don't argue with her. And I looked at it, I went, so here's someone who's understands the wording of what we're talking about, who's completely confused.
Yeah.
In the first 10 minutes of a shopping trolley. And I think that's where this education process is going to keep going. And even though I may not agree with all the recipes in the Women's Weekly Cookbook, and it's not an endorsement, or it's the concept of if we give people information and they can keep learning by whichever method it comes from, I'm still waiting for a Parliament House to put out a low-carb cookbook, which is not going to happen. But so it's a battle that's whack-a-mole is going to keep going for a long time.
Yeah. And who was that you were debating that said that you could get B12 from grains? Are you allowed to say, or?
Off air, yes.
Okay, all right. we'll get that. But that's fine.
But I've seen your great talk about vegetables are trying to kill you. Be warned. I actually put up a slide at the food industry saying hospital food is crap and it's killing my patients.
Yeah.
Okay. And that got reported. That was quoted and reported back to the medical board. Medical board asked the hospital to investigate, and the hospital said, we've found no cases of the hospital food killing Dr. Fettke's patients. So it's a figure of effing speech, right? Right. If you're in hospital with type 2 diabetes and you've got a HbA1c of 11 and it's totally out of control and you're giving them carbs umpteen times per day, ultimately it is crap food and it's killing my patients. Mm. So be careful with what you say because it'll come back to, but my talk about is fruit good or bad for you? Because I'm going back several years, I wasn't brave enough to go and say the whole vegetable thing at that point in time. But that stemmed from a debate against the professor of nutrition for the Defence Forces. Now, we had a debate for Science Week, and it was fruit good or bad for you. And I got the con side, and he got the. Anyway, he actually gave a talk talking about how they'd changed all the processing and chemical nature of fruits. And I thought I probably didn't even need to get up and actually give the talk. And then I gave my talk, and he actually conceded defeat halfway through it.
Yeah.
So, that's when I brought up religion. So I'm comfortable talking about religion because, what's the original sin? Well, it's when Eve took the apple from the tree and God was saying, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't take the fruit of the forest. Don't do it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we speak openly about religion. A lot of people feel uncomfortable. That opening of Belinda's work, I said, I'm not going to let you give that talk about where the Adventist Church sits in the whole thing. But I gave that talk at the CrossFit Games a few years ago now. That was called The Central Role of Nutrition and Everything. Tim Noakes was the other guest speaker, and Belinda, Tim, Greg Glassman, who owned CrossFit at the time, and his CEO and 3 corporate lawyers knew that I was going to cross the boundary. So in the Midwest in the US, not at all religious place, 1,000 people in the audience, I crossed the religion boundary and started exposing the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which Battle Creek, Michigan was only 3 hours drive away by car. And I understand now what people feel like when they go over Niagara Falls in a barrel. There's no coming back from that. And so we're not trying to be disrespectful. It's just really important to actually people know that the food guidelines have been written by a processed food industry religious organisation. Here in Australia, everyone's heard of the star rating on food. Right? The algorithm for that was written by Sanitarium.
Perfect.
And another thing about the health star rating, it's a health star rating against other products in the same group. It's not overall health benefits. So you'll also find that they have the potential to actually, let's say Sanitarium, they produce a small packet of non-up and go, up and down or something like that. And I'm making, this is fictitious, right? And they fill it up with 100%, just sugar and whatever other crap you can find, trans fats and whatever it is, fill it up with that. And then they put their up and go against it, And the Up and Go gets a 4-star rating because it's up against a product which is barely on the market. So you don't actually, it's not Up and Go is not up against milk or water. It's up against the worst product in that category. And you'll find, therefore, health star ratings are only on processed foods. You don't find a health star rating on a steak or an egg. It's just not there. Because it's really interesting, they don't rate that well according to the processed food industry. So again, and so would Sanitarium produce a rating score which is bad against their product? Of course not. Damon Gamow, who did that sugar film, Damon tried to bring in a sugar, how many teaspoons of sugar labelling system here in Australia with some of the profits from the film. It's kept coming up against stumbling block because the only products which actually show how bad they are actually all the processed foods. So all the ones who, it just, if we're going to ask the industry to police themselves, either internally or then externally, advising the government, we're caught. It's biochemistry inside the cell. It's outside the cell. It's politics and money and opinion and egos.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned before, the field of lifestyle medicine, which is something that's been getting a bit more attention recently, it sounds great. It says eat healthy and exercise, and you can be healthy. It's something that you and I both espouse. But unfortunately, because as you were saying, they were founded by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I believe in 2003. It's all about plant-based. And one person that I've had run-ins with and had to sort of do a debunking video against was a Dr. Ids, who is a sort of a TikTok doctor. I don't know if he actually sees any patients or not. I hope he doesn't. But he is one of these lifestyle medicine doctors, and he just pushes the whole plant-based agenda. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because unfortunately, that's something that sounds really appealing to people because they think, finally a doctor is going to look at me holistically and address diet and lifestyle and all these other sorts of things.
Well, the concepts of lifestyle medicine, as you say, eat well, exercise well, sleep well. There's even a spiritual side to it. And I don't have a problem with all that. Mm-hmm. But when you actually come down to the eat well, it is actually plant-based. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm actually respectful of people who wish to travel an improvement in their health. So the latest, I think like this, Lieberman from Harvard University is right into exercise. I just heard him have a chat about that. I think 50% of the American population have never exercised. And I think that's about right, Yeah. James DiNicolatino just put up something even today, that if you're over 30 and you don't have a distended abdomen and you exercise and you eating well, you're in the 1%. So it's and therefore support those people to do that. So as I said, if you move away from having a crap diet and you do to go to plant-based, you are going to feel healthier because you're going to be dropping your sugars, you're going to dropping the seed oils and the deep fried stuff. And I think that it's going to give you some benefit. You'll feel better immediately. You won't be having quite as many of the highs and lows, particularly of glucose. However, you are going to run out of essential proteins and essential fats and micronutrients, and that's when it catches up with you. And if you're actually trying to get your protein requirements and micronutrient levels, it's going to have to come with a major carbohydrate intake. And that talk of my through COVID talk was, is carbohydrate good? What the carbohydrate dose is the poison. We actually went through it because we're talking about low carb, carbs are bad, whatever. I thought I'd do an academic argument so I actually came up with a toxic dose, because a toxic dose is whatever it does harm to the system, at 4 grams or 1 teaspoon of glucose or of sugar will actually start having a negative impact on the body. So to get your protein requirements from a plant-based diet, you're going to have to be having hundreds of grams of protein, of carbohydrate to get there, which I think has got this other whole inflammatory disaster zone. Insulin is a fat storage hormone, but it's a major inflammatory hormone. It's a cancer-promoting hormone. And it's no wonder that over a period of time, people who do try this vegan pathway end up drifting back to eating some animal-based product in their diet. The problem is you can, as the health system, is able to charge more if you've done a course like lifestyle medicine. And lifestyle accreditation is a very expensive process, several $100s just to attend a workshop, and another several $100s to actually do the exams. And once you've committed a whole lot of money to it, you actually start believing it, because for some period of time, and then people get sick. And it's just the false advertising that goes with it. I mean, it drives, again, whack-a-mole, a plant-based diet can revert diabetes. No, it can't. Best results in the literature are a 0.3% improvement in HbA1c, which is the figure we use here in Australia. In the low-carb group, there was a competition. Okay, what's the greatest HbA1c? I think it was Mark Cuccizzella, had a 22.5% reduction in HbA1c. I've had a few patients get 11 to 11, 12, 13% reductions. Normal HbA1c is, you'd like to think, is 5.5. Diabetes is above 6.5. You don't have diabetes if you're 6.49, by the way. Thank goodness for that. That's just complete. It's an arbitrary number drawn there by the industry. You're well controlled if you've got 7.5. No, you're not well controlled. The complications go up at 5.7%. So again, the best vegan vegetarian nutrition is 0.3% reduction. And here, this whole work coming out now about putting type 2 diabetes into remission with a low-carb lifestyle or a ketogenic intervention is reducing these by significant numbers, 3, 4, 5, 22% reduction in HbA1c. James Mookie, who's was the Australian youth. James has been working hard in this spot. He just sent me a text message a couple of days ago. A woman with macular degeneration, 2 years of low carb, put her type 2 diabetes into remission in that period of time, but now also has a complete resolution of her macular degeneration. This is a massive problem right across the world, and it's related to what we eat. It's a metabolic health disorder. So he's actually seeing reversal of eye disease. Now, I'm working with some renal physicians who are seeing reversal of kidney disease, chronic kidney disease, and actually being put on a low-carb, higher protein diet. We can't talk about that in renal disease. And they're actually, so these are professors, by the way, who are actually seeing an improvement, not a complete reversal, but an improvement in a chronic disease. Diabetes, improvement in a chronic disease. Coronary artery calcium scores associated with how much calcium is sitting in your blood vessels, people seeing an improvement in their coronary artery calcium score. This does not happen on a plant-based diet. And so when you just keep hearing this stuff come out, I'm sorry, it's either a lie or they're a fool for believing it. And again, harsh words. But I don't think they're stupid. So therefore, I don't think all the plant-based doctors are stupid. They've just, if all the textbooks surrounding you say one thing, you start believing it.
Yeah. Because
if you start saying the opposite thing, you get into trouble. Welcome to my world. Welcome to your world. Oh, the system doesn't like it when you start challenging it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what topic we're on. We're talking about health today. You haven't even got me off on the other tangents of life and money.
Well, speaking about carbohydrates as well, you do have that great talk talking about carbohydrates being a poison, and you touched on some of them there. But I think you made a very, very interesting and powerful point that really just going up 1 teaspoon really is enough to start having toxic effects on your body. Can you start talking, or can you tell us just a bit about some of this?
So in the bloodstream,
so low, and why just that little bit will cause.
Well, our bloodstream has around about 4 grams of glucose in it. So that's it. It's circulating all the time. There's only a few cells in the body that need glucose. The red blood cells, some of the cells in the lens of the eye, and some of the unusual cells in the loop of Henle in the kidney, some small thin cells. They have actually an absolute requirement for glucose, which can be generated from the breakdown of the glycerol in fat, or it can be broken down or created from gluconeogenesis from protein. So we only have this very small background requirement for glucose. And the body will go to enormous lengths to maintain that, and that's called glucagon, secreted by the pancreas. The pancreas, often known for secreting insulin. So when you eat carbohydrate, it produces insulin. But when we don't eat, glucagon is secreted to keep our blood glucose up. And we go to enormous amounts to keep our blood glucose at a certain level, very low level. But this is a flip on the concept. But the more glucose you have, to come up with the concept that the body does everything in its capacity to get it out of the bloodstream. So it's not actually saying it is a good thing. It's actually saying, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed with sugar, and it gets it out of the bloodstream. And primarily does that via insulin. So the glucose comes in, those levels start getting to the hypothalamus. Ultimately, there's a secretion of insulin by the pancreas, and that insulin will move the glucose out of the bloodstream and into the tissues. I'll come back to that. So if your blood glucose goes up, two things happen. One is that the glycocalyx, which is it's actually the biggest organ in the body, almost, I think, 1.5 square kilometres of lining of our blood vessels. And it's the tiny little inner lining of our blood vessels which keeps the single cell going through it. And when you hit it with glucose, it actually gets thinned down. It's damaged quite. It's a bit like driving along without any tread on your tyres. It actually loses traction, you lose the blood flow, it turns the whole blood supply to be sluggish. So the glycocalyx is damaged by an elevated blood glucose, and those people with diabetes have a chronically thinned glycocalyx, which allows then for the walls to be weaker and for proteins to break through. It's a bit like the same as the leaky gut syndrome. A lot of people have heard about that. When you get inflammation in the gut, the tight junctions between the cells and the small intestine get broken down, proteins get into the bloodstream, you then get allergies and we've talked about the lectins, the pectins, the oxalates start coming into that whole equation. So essentially we end up with a thin-walled, inflamed blood vessel right throughout the entire body, just with an elevated blood glucose. My favourite other thing about blood glucose is that when you actually have an elevated in the blood, it actually leaches into the soft tissue. And then there's a term called the Maillard reaction. Have you heard of that? Yeah, it's a cooking term.
Yeah.
So when you put the piece of bread in the toaster, remind me about that and I'll tell you a funny story, okay? When you put the piece of white bread in the toaster and it heats up, it goes brown. Exactly the same. Now, what that reaction is, it's a reaction of glucose with the protein in the bread under the effect of heat. It's called a glycosation of protein. So exactly the same thing happens in the tissue. So when your blood glucose goes up, your tissue glucose goes up. And with that, under the effect of body heat, the glucose combines with the protein. So effectively, every time your blood glucose spikes, and the obvious example is in diabetes, you are effectively toasting your tissues. You're toasting your brain, your eyes, your kidneys, all the way through the legs. It's just literally, I've explained it to endocrinologists like that, and they've gone, I hadn't thought about it like that. The ones with open minds. Okay. And they went, yeah, that's it. That is the glycosation of protein in the tissues. So the body does not like an elevated blood glucose. Come back to the insulin. The insulin is one thing that it does, and the very first thing it does, it spikes the blood glucose, gets rid of the glucose out of the tissue, pushes it into making more fat. But the other two side effects of insulin is it's a tumour-promoting hormone, and it's an inflammation one. And from the inflammation one, it actually makes osteoarthritis of the knee worse. That data came out of China in 2020. I keep saying not everything came out of bad. China in 2020 was bad. There's a really good research showing that insulin will affect synoviocytes in the knee, osteoarthritic knee, human tissue, and it makes it worse. And I know it wasn't written by a low-carb, but I've said this publicly because very clearly at the end of it, the conclusion was we need to target insulin as a treatment of osteoarthritis of the knee. No, you kids, stop eating the carbohydrate. You won't need the insulin. And in a clinical setting, those patients that actually come along with end-stage arthritis, I ended up sort of not operating, and this is the same thing that Sean Baker had in the US. We've had a few chats about it. We both got into trouble for actually doing less operations because the system requires a throughput. And if your patients, I've got a mate who's a shoulder surgeon who's pretty well retired because all of his patients with rotator cuff disease, he said, you might need an operation, but I want you to do this low-carb nonsense for, 6 weeks, and I'll book you for surgery in 6 weeks. And 3/4 of his patients didn't turn up for surgery. And when you actually break it down to looking at glucose metabolism, so the damage inside cartilage comes from that same myoreaction. It's the glucose combining with the tissue in the knee. When you look at tendons in the shoulder, the ankles, it's the same problem. It's the tendons are actually damaged by the end products of glucose metabolism, not of protein metabolism or fat metabolism. It comes back to glucose. And then when you take the insulin out of the equation and you reduce that glucose load, the tissues have a chance to healing. And so I wish I'd known this at the beginning of my career rather than at the end. Mind you, I wouldn't have had a career. Anyway, that's no. So here's that quick funny story. I wanted to grab some toast for a lecture, and I was flying up to Sydney. And you know Marianne Damasi, who used to be the Catalyst reporter, Catalyst journalist? No. She got into trouble because she was doing the statin issues on the Catalyst program on ABC. And I'll come to Marianne's defence. She's a very smart lady, got targeted by industry again, and ultimately lost her job through that. But anyway, Marianne, I was staying with Marianne. I said, Marianne, I've got to give the lecture tonight, or tomorrow morning. It was a weekend thing. Can you buy a loaf of white bread for me, please? Because I said, I don't want to be seen dead buying white bread. So she went down, with sunglasses on and the hoodie and bought a loaf of white bread, the cheapest white bread. I said, now we need a toaster. She said, I don't think I've got a toaster. So we're staying in her apartment, and so she found a toaster in some back cupboard. And so we're toasting bread for this lecture. We set off the fire alarm for the entire building. So it's just, I can't say anything good about white bread, right? Marianne, forgive me for telling that story. Okay.
No, you're fine. I was going to say too, that is something that I've heard some, vegan proponents, certainly just anti-meat proponents, say is a problem as well. I don't know if you know anything about this, but I figured it was worth a question. Obviously, that Maillard reaction and creating all these, AGEs, advanced glycation and products, these things can be quite damaging.
That's what I put all the ages into the talk as well, but I didn't in the summary bit there.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So, but what they argue too is that, well, if you're eating meat that you cook that browns on the outside, and then you're eating all those AGEs, and then that's damaging to you. Does that hold water, or does our digestion break that down?
Look, I've spent a bit of time looking at this. There's no definitive answer that I've been able to find. However, pH of the stomach is incredibly acidic. Mm-hmm. And as far as I can work out, eating AGEs doesn't get into the bloodstream.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
No, but I don't have the definitive paper, but I'm with you on board. I've actually gone looking for it. Yeah. It's a bit like I tried to find the end products of carbohydrate metabolism, that whole stuff with the ages and the glycation and proteins. I tried to find that with back pain and the discs of the spine. And I would have thought that would have been a unifying theory. So I found it with the cartilage in the joints. I found it with the tendons. I couldn't find it with the discs of the spine. So there's some research. You can start actually next time you're doing a discectomy or some fusion, whip the discs out and start actually doing some biochemical analysis on them. And actually, because nobody's gone looking for it.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So I've got 100 research projects in my head, and now I've just thought, Anthony can do that. Good.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. Yeah, because there certainly are enough of those coming in. I just had 4 micro discs today. So
we just get hold of that gunge, that little bit of shredded crab meat.
Yeah, yeah.
I used to do the spinal surgery for Northern Tasmania, and then for about 15 years. And then I got smarter than you and I stopped. I encouraged one of our previous fellows to come back and take it over.
Yeah.
And then I was doing lots of knees, but then realised I don't need to do the knees if they all just went low carb.
Yeah, true. Exactly. Yeah.
It's fascinating where we've gotten it wrong.
Well, I think that's the thing too. You look at this and you're like, well, we're going to put ourselves out of work. If we keep getting people well, then, what is there to fix? But I mean, there's certainly so many things that were already necessary for doctors to be involved in. So that orthopedic surgery, I mean, people break bones, people hurt themselves, they have accidents and traumas. That's something real that doctors can actually help with. And something that's been fundamental and really why I think doctors have historically had a very good reputation of like, hey, you get broken, some accident, this guy can fix you. That's an amazing thing that someone can do for you. And I think that going back to that would not only be the right thing to do, obviously, because you're helping people, but also more fulfilling as a profession. You're actually helping people who are damaged and nothing else and no one else can help them. Whereas instead of picking up the pieces of poor choices, that's much more rewarding.
I used to be critical of the patients, meaning, you've put yourself into this situation. But I think it's actually us as a health profession or a sickness industry that have actually put them there, because we're not, even if you want to eat well, you're constantly distracted, being undermined. If you chat to physicians, GPs, myself, yourself, when you actually realise that low carb and its extension into keto and then carnivore is actually restored the joy of medicine. Like it actually, when, as I say, I've sort of retired from clinical practice, and one of my colleagues, one of the young guys who came back, said he actually thought it was interesting. He saw quite a few of my patients that didn't like me because I said, you don't need a knee replacement. You need to change your lifestyle. You need to actually just get your act together. And instead of being 120 kilos, I think if you're 100 kilos, you'll find it's less painful. And I'm going to help you do that without not telling you to go and outrun your diet, setting up the supporter. A lot of people can't do it. I get that, but you can't do it if you're not supported. Anyway, he actually had that impression. He said, okay, and this is a conversation we only had a couple of weeks ago. He said he had this impression that I was just, even though he knew me, that I was setting a really high level, not achievable. But then since I've retired, he's actually seeing a whole lot of my patients that did actually do it in follow-up. And I'm not banging my own drum, they are so appreciative that they've been empowered again to take control of their own lives. And he just said to me, I get it. Again, so there's hope, there's a younger generation going, I get it. And I can tell you, and you speak to anyone taking this board on as a health professional, it is a bit more hard work and it requires more time with the patient, but it is incredibly rewarding. Lorene Lawler-Smith in South Australia, she's right on board with this. She set up a clinic herself, dietitian and a counsellor psychologist, offering a fabulous, she said, and she is beaming from ear to ear. David Unwin in the UK is ready to quit. He's over it. Now he's just going to keep going. We stayed with David and Jen a few years ago, and it just is beaming from ear to ear, like a kid literally in a lolly shop, like I can't help but to use the puns. They're just grinning, people close to retirement who are grinning from ear to ear because they're helping people after decades of band-aiding sick care.
Yeah.
And it is that, and Belinda uses that term, band-aiding sick care. That's what we've all been trained to do.
Yeah.
And the only way you can band-aid sick care is actually by medicating, operating. And the only way you can turn around health ultimately is by paying attention to what fuel you put in the tank.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so flaming obvious now.
Yeah. No, it is. And I certainly didn't want to, I certainly didn't mean that the patient making bad choices. And I mean, some people do. Some people drink and smoke and do things that everyone knows is probably not a good idea. But I do 100% agree with you that a lot of these people are trying to eat well. But when a patient comes into me and I talk to them and they're having health issues in my functional medicine practice outside of neurosurgery, and I'll talk to them about their health, and I'll talk to them about what they're eating, and or even in other positions as well. Someone will say, well, no, I eat well, I eat really healthy, I eat really clean. Mm-hmm. And I was asking, okay, what does that mean to you? And it's always the dietary guidelines. I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and fruit juices. And I try to eat very lean meat and stay away from red meat and things like that. And that's what they think. And so I've spoken to other doctors about this, generally overweight doctors, funny enough. And they always say, well, the problem is with patients, being overweight and not being healthy is that they just don't listen to us. They just don't listen to our advice. And I'm like, are you listening to your advice? Because it may not be great advice. And I point out to them that no, it's actually because they've been listening to our advice. That's what's gotten them into the bad situation that they're in.
But I was listening to my own advice. Mm-hmm. I got it wrong and I was unhealthy. Yeah. I don't like to think that I'm not double negative. I don't think I'm not intelligent. Mm-hmm. But I was caught up with all the information that I was surrounded by to find out that it was completely wrong.
Yeah.
So am I stupid, or did I get the wrong information to make my judgments from? And I think we're at a real junction. We either go down that path or that path. And because we've been on that one way for a long time, we do need the converted sardines. We do need to do. You are going down the highway. You are going the wrong way. Turn around. That's. And at one moment I'm frustrated, another moment I'm elated, and all it requires is And so we need to positively reinforce that message, because it's tough going, I'm only 23. I mean, I look a lot older because it's, So depending on which way the conversation goes, someone said, I play golf with the vets, right? Mm-hmm. Inspirational guys in their 80s, and they say, how old are you, young fella? I said, I'm 85. I'm just looking better than you. Yeah. So it can go both ways. I actually was playing golf with two guys who were in a cart. One guy, he showed me, he looked after my finger, which is sort of still half working. I said, good to see you can play golf. And the other guy said, you gave me some advice to lose weight for my back. Because at that point, I used to put a slab of beer under each arm. I said, you've got a slab of beer that you're carrying around unnecessarily. A slab of beer is 10 kilos, by the way. So I had 2 slabs of beer in my office, and I'd get them to walk around. And they were well and truly stale and got thrown out in the end. And I said, what did I say to you? I said, I gave you a slab of beer under each arm. And he was about to do his backswing. And I said, well, you didn't pay any attention to me then, did you? Because he still had the big gut. Yeah. He then wrecked his shot. And we all had a laugh at his expense. It was the 18th hole, so it was okay.
Yeah, that's funny.
You got to play dirty. Your money was on it, $2 or something.
Oh, that's good.
I think it's once you start talking and working in this area or practicing in this area, it's joyous, frustrating, and you end up meeting a whole lot of interesting people all across the world. We have a bit in common. I was actually born in Perth, so
nice.
And these enlightened people are generally those that are quite willing to buck the system a bit. And, they're not the dead fish. Mm. And the joy that it then gives to, and as I said, we've got 2 beautiful grandchildren who aren't no carb, but they don't have much carb. And all I can say is that they are 2 healthy children. Good. I'm not going to say they're exceptional, even though, as a grandfather they are, but nonetheless, all I can say is there are no detrimental effects either through the pregnancy for a low-carb lifestyle. And it's the most powerful tool in gestational diabetes as well. Mm. And it's just starting to be talked about. Yeah. And babies actually thrive, in embryo and utero actually thrive in a state of ketosis. Brain development is critical on ketosis. I think, we're just starting to open up, and I get into trouble because I open up Pandora's box and then I give it a kick, and sort of, but once, we talked about this just beforehand, everything in nutritional science, in fact, most things in medicine, but I'll say everything in nutritional science, what we've been told, you poke that house of cards and it just keeps tumbling down over and over and over. Mm-hmm. And so it is really just, and when you realise it's just all been made up and backed by the food industry and the Journal of Nutrition, and was started by the food industry, and nutritional science was to actually improve the profitability, the palatability and the shelf life of food. It had nothing to do with health. Mm. And we let that slip into medical literature saying nutritional science is health science. Got enough troubles with medical and health science for being flawed and not being able to be repeated. But when we actually said improving food palatability, profitability and shelf life then became health science. I keep coming back to swearing. You're making me do it, Anthony. I'm sorry.
Well,
but once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the quote. That's it. Once you can't unknow it, you just see it and you go over and over and over. Yeah. And it's the same players. And then you start, I presented to a food labelling inquiry from the Senate food labelling inquiry. Okay, stop putting pictures of animals on plant-based food because over 40% of the Australian population is not literate. They can't read the food label. So if you've got a chicken on the food label, they will think it's chicken. You can write whatever you want saying it's plant-based chicken. So we've actually had a win there. So that's a good note, So here's a little guy presenting to a Senate inquiry, presented all this work and so now there's been a change in the food labelling laws in Australia that the plant-based food companies cannot, by law, put a picture of a chicken, a cow or a pig on their plant-based food.
Good.
Now that's helped 40% of the population, in theory, because of food labelling law. So did I ever think I'd be, as an orthopaedic surgeon presenting material on food labelling to a Senate inquiry? No. But got some stories to tell the grandkids one day.
Yeah.
At the moment, they just think we're crazy grandparents. Yeah.
That's a good rep. You have to really try and reinforce that. Get the rock star status out of it. All the crazy things that you and Belinda do. There are 4 phases of parent-child relationships. I don't think you've got any. You haven't entered into having your own children yet, have you? No.
And the first phase is when children think their parents are gods. Mm. And then the second phase is teenage years, where the children think their parents are idiots. Mm-hmm. Then the third phase is where the children think the parents actually know some stuff. Mm-hmm. And then the final phase is when the children think their parents are idiots again. So we're very comfortably in phase 3 at the moment.
Good.
And not totally embarrassed to have the surname Fettke.
Yeah.
And I only realised a couple of years ago, which I should, this is how stupid I am. Fettke, German. It's a German name. Fett is fat. So somehow or other, I have the key to fat.
Yeah, right.
I was born into actually being a troublemaker. I didn't have any choice.
Yeah, exactly. There's a great Mark Twain quote where he said, when I was 11, I just thought my dad was just an idiot and didn't know anything. And when I was 21, I was amazed at how much he'd learned in that time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And that sort of brings me into the other question I had. You're talking about, pregnancy and ketosis in children, infants, and the fetus actually being in a state of ketosis and that being important for brain development. Obviously, I get a lot of questions from pregnant women or people that are trying to conceive. They're saying, is this safe? Is this safe to be in ketosis, be on a carnivore diet during pregnancy? What about my kids? Is this safe for them? What would you say if someone asked you that?
I think the diet you require is one that is nutritionally complete, okay, without unnecessary additives. So a nutritionally complete diet where our body requires complete proteins, complete healthy fats, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals. And again, come back, there is no biochemical pathway in the body that requires ingested glucose or fructose. The guy who wrote the definitive study on that, Chaffee, a Swiss biochemist. I actually flew all the way to Sydney. He was actually presenting at a Coca-Cola meeting, strangely enough, to say that fructose by itself isn't the cause of obesity. I agree, of course it was, and that's why Coca-Cola brought him out. I flew all the way to Sydney just so I could ask him the question that I knew already the answer. And I warned him that I was going to ask him the question at lunch. I said, so publicly in front of the entire Coca-Cola industry, I said, Professor Chaffee, is there a human biochemical requirement for ingested fructose? He went, no. It was a loaded question. He knew it. But I said, anyhow, there was shouting from the podium because I wasn't allowed to ask him. But anyway. And they talk about us being a cult. Fair, go to a Coca-Cola industry meeting. Whoa. I put my hand up at the beginning of there to ask a question. Dr. Gary Fettke, Tasmanian, the entire audience turned around. And so I thought, cool, they know who I am. So
you've been on this for a while.
Post-COVID cough. I did get it. Damn it. So a couple of months ago. Anyway, so that's what you require. So when that's what we require as humans, and that's what we require as developing a fetus, developing embryo. And our body and our development is dependent on ketones and proteins, not on glucose. So our daughter was pregnant with our second grandchild, and she had morning sickness, which prompted me to actually look at this. And there's a little talk on YouTube about it. It's part of other talks. But essentially, she had severe morning sickness and couldn't eat. So therefore, that's fasting. And she was in a state of ketosis. And so therefore, I thought, actually, this will be interesting to see what are the results of outcome on development on women with morning sickness. So if you're going to design a study, what you'd like to do it is on lots of people. You'd like to do it on the most critical time of growth and development, which is the embryo. You'd never get this past an ethics committee, by the way, right? You just couldn't possibly do it. So I want to experiment on unborn babies. You forget it, right? What a shame. So I thought, hang on, and you want it multi-centre and you want it reproducible across international borders. And so I look, okay, I'm going to look this up. And guess what? We have the results of tens of thousands of babies that have been born where the mothers had severe morning sickness. It's been well and truly documented. So as it turns out, the more severe, the old wives' tale is that, and I'm not being sexist for that term, the old wives' tale is that if you've got severe morning sickness, the baby will be fine. Well, guess what? The literature well and truly supports that. So the more severe your morning sickness, the worse it is, the more likely you are to be in ketosis, fasting and not getting any nutrition, let alone good proteins and healthy fats, the better the outcomes. So you're more likely to go, women are more likely to go through the term, children are more likely to have normal weight, less likely to have congenital abnormalities, less likely to have complications, and more likely to be developing normally. We've also been able to experiment on the same unborn babies by looking at gestational diabetes, which gets more severe through pregnancy. But nonetheless, so taking a high glucose carbohydrate diet, getting into the baby, because that's what it is, it's diet, elevated blood glucose. So they've been studied, again, tens of thousands of results. The women, more likely to miscarry, more likely to not get through to term. Babies, very high birth weights, very low birth weights, more likely to have congenital abnormalities, and particularly the cardiovascular ones, which are related to environment, not the genetic ones. And they're more likely to have babies that are sick, prone to getting obesity, diabetes, and have learning difficulties and ADHD. So the study's already been done. Now, I had, when that went out, I think this must have been one of my COVID, talks. So I thought I'm going to do some research into this because of my daughter. So I had a vested interest. I thought she was worried because she couldn't eat, and at the rest of the time she was fit. And so women who, again, anecdotally have been looked at through this, and it's been have done very well. The babies have done well. But if you take the most extreme form, of a ketogenic diet, which is morning sickness, actually the better the outcomes is the long and short of it. And the study's already been done on tens of thousands of women and their babies. So forget the ethics committee. So
yeah. And then for children as well, I mean, I know that during breastfeeding, children are actually in ketosis. So does that continue on? Is that to be preferred in?
I wonder if it's Joy Kitty, again, it's my talk. I credit them with that information. So embryo fetus definitely in ketosis, in growing inside the mother, and up until about 2.5, 3 years of age, child will drift into ketosis very quickly. By about 4 or 5, they start developing into a more of an adult picture that to get into ketosis will take a little bit of time. So the most formative years of a childhood, embryo, fetus, early development is actually based on the child being significant amounts of time in ketosis. So I just don't think it's dangerous. No, that's a normal state. And we evolved by not having 7 meals a day. We didn't get to the top, or theoretically we're at the top of the food chain. I think that's about to go backwards. But anyway, that's another moment of philosophy. We've got another hour. Anyway, so we got to the top of the food chain by evolutionary eating, which was eating when we had access to food and not eating when we didn't. So we spent, and it's not about, saying we're just going to go back and be just eating the wild animal and hunting themselves. But eating in that way is not harmful to us. Yeah. And it's and again, so if you're encouraging people to have a complete diet, a nutritionally complete diet, I'm sorry to the rest of the world, but you require an animal-based food. And if you eat from tip to tail, nose to tail, in a respectful fashion, an animal that's been cared for, and that makes me not a proponent of factory farming. I'm carefully saying that. And here in Australia, we have fabulous ability. I talk about this. We really should be eating respectfully. We live in an environment where we're able to eat well, really eat well, and it's disrespectful to the rest of the world if we don't look after the way we eat. So we can have well-reared, healthy, animal-based diets and get the health benefits of it. And so to have it rammed down our throats that we should be having a plant-based diet, which is a good animal-based diet is actually beneficial to the planet and the environment. The animal welfare, the nutrients, with the urine and the feces that drop back onto the ground actually puts nutrition back into the soil. A plant-based diet actually robs nutrition of the soil. The biggest agricultural export in the world is actually topsoil because of our plant-based agricultural practice. And the vegans will argue, lots of that's going to feeding animals in feedlots. A portion of it is, but again, we can change that equation by farming our grasslands. I've spoken to the meat industry. They would love to respectfully farm our national forests, not trample them to the ground. And guess what that would do? That would get rid of our bushfire risk. We can be smarter about this, and that's all I'm talking about. We just got to be smarter with what we eat, smarter with what we teach, smarter with what we live, and in the process of that, we'll actually look at the entire environment as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you caught up with Peter Ballestat?
I have. Yeah, absolutely.
Must have missed that one. Peter's coming out here in October.
Oh, for low-carb Sydney.
Yeah, he's also coming to low-carb Launceston.
Oh.
There's no conference, but he's going to spend a few days with us, and I think we're going to go.
Okay. Nice.
We'll go out bush for a few days.
Oh, nice.
So Peter's fabulous on that whole topic of where it sits in the animal agricultural industry.
Yeah, I really like Peter as well. I came across his stuff, I think 4 or 5 years ago now, and definitely like it. I did have him on the podcast last year, And so I encourage people to watch that one. When people talk about the environment and, are cows bad? Is it sustainable for, 8 billion people to eat meat? And I was like, yes, absolutely. In fact, it's important for us to do that. And here's why. And so I send them that video I did with him.
Oh, Peter's, I've just asked him for an update because he's got actually a 4-page document with every vegan argument and the counterpoints.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Is that his website or where is that?
He'd forgotten he had it until I asked him, where's the updated one? So I sent him.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
I've got version 7. So I said, Peter, where's version 8? He said, I haven't done one for a while, but I need to update that. So, yeah. So if it comes my way, but what I've done is I've prompted him to actually just update the document that he's already done. And again, as we came back to it, I actually think people who travel that vegan pathway are well-intentioned. They've taken an interest in their own health. They're exploring their well-being. They're exploring what information is available to them. And they're on a health journey. And lots of the speakers in the low-carb carnivore space have actually been ex-vegans.
Yeah, true.
And, I'm not going to name them because some of them, I don't know if they've made it public, but, and in that low-carb space, if you go to a conference dinner, most people who have been speaking in this space for 10 years or so have all moved towards being pretty well carnivore. Mm-hmm. I remember a buffet up in the Gold Coast a year or two ago. Everyone just came back with just piles of meat. It's just on their food. And we just all looked at each other and went, okay. Look, I am an omnivore. I will have some veg because it makes Belinda happy and it does add a bit of colour to the plate. Mm-hmm. But I don't think I've been an omnivore for about a week. But there are other reasons for that. So I was batching. There you are. That's the simple answer. I was batching.
Yeah.
But I did take whatever greens I found. I took it out to the chook yard and I'll get that back as an animal-based product fairly soon.
That's it. Recycle it up.
Yeah. It's a fascinating journey, as you know, and welcome to it. That's really what.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been a very, interesting and enlightening time for me, doing the podcast and being able to speak to people like yourself and to Peter, who I found, very interesting, and seeing your talks and being inspired by them, and now getting a chance to speak to you as well has been an absolute pleasure. I don't want to take up all of your time, but I did want to. I just wanted to just touch on a couple things, and then maybe if you had time for it. I don't know if you're stuck for time or if you're okay.
I've actually put a slow cook silverside beef on, but it's not out yet.
Okay.
The boss is looking after it. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, it was just a couple other questions to do with sugar in particular and fructose. And the harms of it. I know you've done, you have a website, fructose.com. Is that right? Or
No, fructose.com, which is well and truly out of date. I've got to admit, I'm so far behind on keeping that one up to scratch. But the principle's there. And guess what? Biochemistry doesn't change. It's there. Biochemistry, how it moves into our bodies, doesn't change.
Yeah.
People say, well, can't you update that talk? I go, no.
Yeah. Can you update the Krebs cycle for me? Yeah. And the Pythagorean theorem while you're at it?
Yeah, it's just and I keep saying an orthopedic surgeon, even someone doing neurosurgery can understand the Krebs cycle. We're not talking about page 500 in the physiology books. We're talking about page 20.
Yeah.
It's not, and I just saw some professor of nutrition in the US shoot himself in the foot. I went to a diabesity meeting here in Australia a couple of years ago. There's a professor of nutrition, and she got up there in her talk and said, look, I'm really not that good on the Krebs cycle, and then just said the most ridiculous things. And I was a bit argumentative with that one because the pharmaceutical industry was that, and I called out a couple of speakers for their vested interests. I mean, it's just so flaming obvious. If someone's promoting medication and drugs over healthy living, you just start searching and you find out that they're being paid for by the pharmaceutical or the food industry. Anyway, so I was, this woman realised I was a bit aggro, and her husband intervened. I said, you just can't get up there and say stuff like that. A, you can't get up there and say, A, you don't know what you're talking about, and then B, come out with stuff which is that you've now lectured to 200 people involved in diabetes and obesity in Australia and just told them crap. Mm-hmm. And I get into trouble for calling it out, but why am I the only person in 300 there saying you just gave out crap? Because all the rest are stooges. I'm sorry, it just drives me insane. Because I'm talking about basic biochemistry. Anyway, so I digress, as you've already worked out. That's pretty easy for me to do.
But it's good that someone does, because there were 300 people there and you were the only one. But at the same time, one is enough, and you saying that and raising those points, at least some of those 300 people are going to think, okay, wait a minute, hold on, those are some good points.
That's only 0.3%. I need another 10 people with me to get up to the 3%. But the following week, we were back at the farmers market here in Lonnie, and someone, Belinda knew because it used to be used to teach him Sunday school in Melbourne, who's now a pharmaceutical rep. And he caught up with at the farmers market and said, was Gary in Melbourne last week? So already the diabetes pharmaceutical industry were discussing this bad guy from Tasmania who was calling everyone out. So yes, we are calling, Belinda and I, we say regularly, we are not going to change everything, but it's really hard to go to sleep with a mosquito in the room. And that's all we are. And if we can just keep annoying the out of everyone, then we'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
Whilst we're still having fun. I think we're still having fun, okay.
I think that sounds like fun.
It just go. Yeah. Anyway, it shouldn't be fun. I'm so naive. I thought this would be all over 10 years ago. Oh, this fructose thing. Oh, the Krebs cycle. Everyone will work that out.
Yeah. No. Well, but like you say, there are so many vested interests that are making literally trillions of dollars. I think the sugar industry makes, last I heard, Dr. Lustig in one of his books said $1.3 trillion a year. Or just the sugar industry, and then so processed food and everything else that comes off of that is going to be making even more than that.
Well, the biggest fruit exports in the world are bananas and oranges. Mm-hmm. Think of the food miles that are travelled by that stuff.
Yeah,
unnecessarily.
Yeah, right. Well, and that was, bring me to your talk about fruit. Is it good for you? That's something that I think is really interesting because there are a lot of people who do espouse a carnivore diet, but then they sort of come like keto, low carb, and then carnivore, and then they go, oh wait, but fruit and honey, that's okay. So they eat meat and fruit and honey, which I still think is better than almost anything else they could do. But I would be interested to hear your thoughts on the fruit and honey side of things.
Well, if you are going to eat fruit and honey, eat fresh local. I mean, my dietary guidelines, which has actually gone to the NHMRC, because I've going to spend a few $1 million doing it. I said, look, I'll write them for you. Just give me $2 million, I'll be happy. And here's the dietary guidelines for Australia and the world in one sentence. Eat fresh, local, seasonal, whole food based on your culture and environment, avoiding added sugar and processed food.
Pretty simple.
It is pretty simple. When you actually work out what I've actually said, it's a very safe statement. It's actually low carb. Mm-hmm. It's actually animal-based because the only things which are seasonally available all year round are animals. Mm-hmm. Fruit is very much a seasonal product. So my very safe one sentence is actually very descriptive when you take it apart. But when it comes to fruit, I say, look, it's really simple. Fruit contains glucose and fructose, but the fructose component will make you hungry. And the health benefits of fruit are clearly overstated. When you look at it at a micronutrient level, clearly other products animal-based foods, even vegetables, green leafy vegetables, smash fruit for nutrients well and truly. And in fact, historically, we used to have greengrocers. We didn't have fruit and veg sections. You used to go to the greengrocers. So the term fruit and veg is actually a new term brought around by the food industry based on a topic in a meeting in the Baja Peninsula of California in 1991 between the American Cancer Council and 44, might be a little bit wrong on that number, well-meaning industry bodies, including McDonald's and Walmart. And that group's now up to 200 odd. And essentially, it's the food industry. And in that topic, they came up with this: if you eat more fruit and veg, then you're going to have less cancer. That's the historical picture of it, 1991, Baja Peninsula. And so then there was an epic study out of Europe that started about that time to look at quartiles of fruit and vegetable consumption in Europe and then looking at cancer outcomes. And 20 odd years down the track, found no difference whatsoever. It didn't change it at all. When they went back to look at the data that was available to them in 1991, that actually socioeconomic status was actually the bigger predictor of cancer outcomes. But if you're of a higher socioeconomic status, you actually bought more fruit and veg. So it was the confounder, which nobody looked at, but it sent us off on this wild goose chase of the last 30, 40 years to actually eat more fruit and veg. The term 5 a day, completely made up.
Yeah.
Just came out of nowhere. Some countries it's 7 days, some places it's 3 plus 2, some places it's 5 plus 2. It's a completely made up number. Zoe Harkham's got a theory on it. Someone said, has anybody got any ideas of how it should be, what we should come up with? They put their hand up. Oh, 5, okay, 5 a day. That's probably as much science as in it.
Yeah.
It's a bit like having 4 square metres around everyone in COVID. No, we're not going to talk about COVID, but I actually couldn't find any science behind it. So 4 square metres, I've worked out, is about the space. If you get within 4 square metres, then you'll be able to identify who farted. Right. Again, there's just no, when you start scratching the surfaces, you just become a complete doubter. Like distance, social distancing is 1.5 metres in some places, it's 1.2 in others, 1 metre, another 2 metres, another 1.8. Literally all over the place. No science behind it. 5 a day, no science behind it. Fruit and veg causes all these things and predict this. No science behind it. All funded pretty well by the food industry to promote their product for profitability, shelf life. Other foods smash that. So over time, the food industry has actually increased the sugar content of that food. So it improves shelf life. It's decreased the fibre content on it. That's a whole other topic, fibre. It's decreased fibre content because the amount of fibre in the food actually causes more damage and decreases the shelf life. Side issue, because tangent, the third biggest greenhouse gas producer in the world after China and the US is food waste,
right? Of
which the vast majority of that is fruit and veg, not animal-based products.
That would have been close. Yeah.
Users of it. So the benefits of fruit are well and truly overstated. And I say that it's overstated in nature and it's overstated in science. Like a fruit advertises itself by getting brighter and shinier, red, orange, yellow, when it's at its peak sugar content. Why does it advertise itself to be eaten by birds and animals and humans? So we will propagate its seed. So its survival mechanism is to get brighter, shinier, and sugarier. So we'll propagate its seed. The fruit hasn't worked out that it's not smart enough to work out that we're dropping its seed into a porcelain bowl. But it will one day. That's evolutionary. Stop, this is just a waste of time. So we've got this, so it advertises itself. But look at food labelling in the supermarket. The brighter, the shinier it is and the more prominent it is in the eye, which is all processed junk food, lots of chocolates with shiny packets. Do you ever see, packets of healthy, muesli in this dark black packet going, this might kill you? No, it's like tobacco. It just doesn't have it. So fruit advertises itself in nature for our benefit. And it's advertised in the supermarket for its benefit, but it's actually of no benefit to us whatsoever. It's only beneficial to the fruit or the fruit supplier. And the reason behind that, if we come back to fructose drives behaviour. So fructose got multiple pathways. So we know quite a bit about glucose. Fructose was only, as I say, definitively described in 2010. Might be 11. The 11 might be the paper by Chaffee. That's why I went and caught up with him personally. If I'm going to have a website called No Fructose, I should actually have a meeting with the guy who actually described the metabolism of fructose. So anyway, so fructose has multiple things that it does. It will actually stimulate the brain at the hypothalamus to make you hungry. As a negative, so leptin's a hormone produced by, if you've got too much fat in the body, leptin, I know you this stuff, I know you know this stuff, but leptin, when you've got fat in the body, it produces a hormone called leptin, which goes to your brain and says, you don't need to eat anymore, you've got plenty on board. When leptin levels drop down, you'll get hungry. Fructose will inhibit that effect of leptin on the brain, so it'll effectively make you hungry. Ghrelin's a hormone secreted by the stomach, which gives you the rumbly stomach and will make you hungry. Fructose stimulates that. Fructose also, once it starts getting into the gut, into the small intestine, it actually starts upregulating the receptors which allow it to get into the body, which makes sense that the body actually, when at a time of plenty, so fruit's seasonally available. If you're an animal, if you're driven to eat the fruit, and you'll be insatiable about it. That's why possums will strip a fruit tree bare the night before you actually want to eat it. It will strip the tree bare, and it will just become, so you can immediately get fat, so you can fatten up for winter hibernation. That's why bears hibernate and then comes out, and they will get fat, literally to store fat. We are no different. And the food industry has worked out that fructose is the addictive portion of it. Fructose will stimulate you to actually eat more. And it will set receptors off that will actually allow you to keep eating more and keep putting more and more into the system. When it's no longer available, you'll down-regulate that. But food availability and sugar availability is 363 days a year in Australia. And you know that we get paranoid and frantic because on the night before Christmas and the day before Good Friday, there is a shopping frenzy because everyone doesn't think they're going to get their sugar the following day. Now, every person who's gone to the shops on that day looking for food knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's a feeding frenzy because of a panic of a very primitive reflex. So for me, if you're going to eat fruit, A, know that you're going to be hungry for the next several hours after it. B, it's going to get stored as fat. And so it's nowhere near as beneficial for you as it's meant to be. And people say, I have some frozen berries. Well, the vitamin C component of that is gone within 6 or 8 weeks of being frozen. You mentioned vitamin C and people going towards the carnivores and they drift off and they want to have their honey and they want to and their vitamin C. As it turns out, glucose metabolism is very dependent on that vitamin C, and it comes back through the fructose pathway and uric acid. So one of the byproducts of fructose metabolism is uric acid. A lot of people have heard about uric acid because it causes gout. So people who eat lots of fruit and lots of sugars get more gout. So we've had a doubling of gout in society in the last 10 years, even though people are traditionally eating less meat and drinking less. So the only thing that's gone up is our carbohydrate intake, and that's why we've got gout. So uric acid is a byproduct of fructose metabolism. Fructose inhibits the thing. There's so much biochemistry. I almost need the pictures on the lecture slides. So essentially, you get more uric acid in that thing, and uric acid actually increases blood pressure, and it actually makes you more anxious, and actually makes you a bit hungrier. In that same pathway, nitric oxide is produced, and the uric acid inhibits the production of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is important for keeping our blood vessels open for our blood pressure, keeping our blood flow to our brain, and also critical in our immune system. So fructose gets caught up in that. Fructose produces uric acid. It increases uric acid, and uric acid also decreases the production of nitric oxide, which is critical. So people who give up sugar and carbs, literally their blood pressure comes down within days. So it just drops down because you stop creating all these things which raise blood pressure. So you're getting me to do a lot of visual of talking about metabolic pathways which are best described. So all the talks I've got to use images which are actually the layperson can understand and follow the lines. The critical thing about all that is vitamin C inhibits that inhibition. So this is where God's really smart. God's there's quite a clever, God with a little g, so I'm non-denominational. There's a couple of really clever things about fructose metabolism. One's at the uric acid level, and the other one's at the small dense LDL, the bad cholesterol particles, which are a byproduct of fructose. So the bad cholesterol is largely coming from fructose. It's not coming from eating fat. It's coming from fructose. Different pathway, but all of those lectures. So God's very clever. Okay, we've got to give him credit, him, her. The time when fruit is seasonally available and we're an animal, because that's all we are, and we are gorging ourselves on it, that time is normally towards the end of summer, autumn. And the vitamin C that comes with fruit is an antidote to some of the harm that it's actually causing at the uric acid level. So if you don't eat sugar or carbohydrate, you don't need much vitamin C.
Right.
So one of the problems of early exploration around the world and the problems of scurvy was that the sailors were being fed gruel. The gruel then brought mice around the rest of the world and rats and all that. But essentially scurvy was a byproduct of the diet of the sailors. If we take the very northern European explorers, the Vikings, they didn't go around and they didn't get scurvy because they were eating meat products, animal-based. And so carbohydrates, if you don't eat carbohydrate, you probably don't need much vitamin C. The small amount that you might need actually comes in the meat that we eat. So not in a small amount, we actually need a tiny amount of it. The other point in that whole fructose metabolism pathway is that when the small dense LDL, that lipid particle, which then gets into the subintimal layer of the blood vessels and then becomes oxidized, and there's a lot in that term, but the inflammatory byproduct of fructose, which sits in the blood vessel wall, is encompassed by a mast cell or foam cell and actually tries to settle that inflammation, take those particles out. They're under the effects of those cells that require vitamin D. So vitamin D associated with sunlight. So again, the time if we're going to eat fructose, if we're an animal, is at the end of the summer, beginning of autumn, and it's going to come with two antidotes to some of the byproducts. One is it's going to come with some vitamin C, which helps that uric acid nitric oxide pathway, and it will come with stimulating the cleanup mechanism of the subintimal layer. So again, for want of a better term, I'll use the term God's very clever. But we were not meant to actually eat fructose all year round in the animal kingdom. The same thing goes with honey. Honey is half glucose. Well, in fact, it's a bit more fructose. I think, depending on types, it's about 55% fructose, 45% glucose. That's why it tastes sweeter than sugar. If you want to, as a hunter-gatherer, climb a tree, break into a wild beehive, and then break that open with your hands, destroying the nest, and then sucking the honey out of that, good luck to you. Honey is not supposed to be available to you all year round in a glass jar in your pantry. And again, it's just glucose and fructose. And again, it comes down to biochemistry. If you want to eat this stuff, if you want to eat fructose, understand it's going to drive behavior, it's going to make you fat. If you want to eat glucose, understand it's going to have an effect on your blood vessel walls immediately. It's going to give you the Maillard reaction. It's going to be stored as fat, and it's going to be stored along with inflammation and those advanced glycation enzymes. Fine, you can do that. But you're going to pay a price for it over a period of time. I've paid the price. We're all paying that as a society right now. If you want to have a lot of fructose, and if you're going to eat glucose, 30% of it gets converted back into fructose. If you're overweight, or your blood glucose is above or pre-diabetic, you would end up with 30% of the glucose coming back into fructose, which I call the runaway train. Then you add in the polyunsaturated seed oils, and that's that what I call nutritional model of inflammation in modern disease. And welcome to the trouble I got into just for making up a model. Very proud of the fact that I came up with that model. And it's now, all I'm saying is if you do the opposite of it, cut your refined carbohydrates, cut your sugar out, and drop the seed oils, which have a 4-year half-life in your body, you will be healthier. And guess what, people? That's what happens. And it's just simple biochemistry, but it goes against the narrative of what's in our textbooks because the textbooks have been written by industry.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting too. I hadn't heard that about the glucose being like 30% of the glucose being converted into fructose as well.
Yeah, via the polyol pathway, and that was done originally in the 1970s using cataract, that information. I can still remember Richard Johnson, who's a nephrologist over in the US, has actually written a few great books around that whole topic. He's a just very learned man about fructose and uric acid. And I read one of his papers, and I still remember, do you know Grant Schofield over in New Zealand? Grant's a professor of public health over there. And Grant, we're in the middle of a lecture over there, an anti-sugar meeting actually. And I handed this across to Grant, and he just went, "Oh shit," excuse the language. And it was just loud enough in the midst of a lecture that the professor was heard it saying, "Oh shit." I said, "Here's a key," and I got to meet Richard Johnson at that meeting, and I've got a copy of his book called The Fat Chance, which actually talks a lot about that hibernation concept and what happens when we come out of hibernation. There's so much to learn from the animal kingdom and where fructose and glucose comes into the overall equation. And again, you can't argue with all this biochemistry because it's reproducible and it's done by nerdy people who aren't making money. It's literally, I'm an enthusiastic, mature age student on it. I mean, I didn't actually, to be fair, I didn't understand biochemistry at uni. I didn't make any attention. I knew all about that Krebs cycle and that, I had it all out on butcher's paper, just all drawn out here, whatever. And I knew enough to pass the exam, but I didn't understand the relevance of it. One of the other byproducts of uric acid, of fructose, is it travels down an aldehyde pathway. It effectively gets turned into alcohol. It's one of the causes of what happens with some of the changes in the liver. One of the causes, only there's a few others through lipid metabolism. But so therefore you'll actually see go to the wildlife shows and watch monkeys getting drunk on eating fruit. And if you're actually drunk, you feel lethargic. And so if you have a diet which is high in sugar, high in fructose, it is another one of the reasons contributing to our state of lethargy in society. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but we are effectively got a society which is half drunk with the amount of sugar that we're having. And I'm sorry, it's just biochemistry.
Yeah.
And then if you actually drink alcohol, that actually inhibits glucagon. It's a really interesting thing about, I've done the experiment. I was proofreading Zoe Harcum's book called The Diet Fix. It's a fabulous book. It's only about 20 pages about what to eat. And the rest of the book is about why people don't lose weight. All the other reasons, all the other things that come into it. It's an easy read. Free plug for Zoe's book, but I think it's just great in a nutshell. But there was one paragraph or one sentence in there talking about alcohol. So I spoke to Zoe. I said, well, where did this come from? She said, because I said, I can't find it. But effectively, if you drink alcohol, I don't know if you've heard this stuff about alcohol and glucagon. I got into trouble at Low-carb USA. I was giving a talk at a podium, and I said, I actually know how alcohol works and affects your weight. And the entire audience told me to shut up. So you haven't told me to shut up, so I'll keep going. So glucagon's the other half of insulin again. Glucagon's the one that raises your blood glucose. So when you're not eating, it actually keeps your blood glucose up. When you drink alcohol, it comes up the portal vein into the liver, and it's an incredible insult to the liver. So the liver will actually stop all of its activity and will actually just get rid of the toxin, gets rid of the alcohol. Remembering fructose gets turned into aldehyde, and it spends a whole lot of time trying to get rid of that alcohol anyway. But when you drink alcohol, everything pretty well shuts down apart from getting rid of the alcohol. So the glucagon works in the liver to actually raise blood glucose. When it's inhibited, so glucagon works in the liver, and one of the ways it does that, it breaks down the glycerol chain of fat. So it releases glucose into the bloodstream. When alcohol hits the liver, your blood glucose, it just stops producing it. Now, I've done that experiment on myself with a glucose CGM, and it was a Saturday night. Belinda had cooked a lovely meal. She said, what are you having for dinner? I'm ready to have dinner. I said, no, I'm just going to have 2 glasses of your mum's white wine, which is sitting in the fridge. She said, no, I'm going to have dinner. I said, no, I'm just going to have 2 glasses of white wine. So I hadn't eaten all day, exercised on the farm, whatever. I had 2 glasses of white wine. What happened to my blood glucose?
Up, down.
Went down, dropped. So not everyone, but a lot of people had that experience. They'd come in, hot day, have a glass of grog, feel really lightheaded. I don't think it's the alcohol doing anything. I think it's your blood glucose dropping down. Now, my blood glucose stayed relatively down all night, right through to bacon and eggs for breakfast the following morning. So I had at least a 12-hour effect. And that's another experiment study I want to do on 50 medical students. I want them to drink alcohol with a CGM on. I just need time, right? But anyway, so what the phenomenon that happened is I was hungry all night because my blood glucose was down. And this may explain why you have a night out on the town and you might go out and eat a meal, but on the way home, you've still got the munchies and just stop for a kebab or a pizza or whatever. Or you have ice cream when you get home, which potentiates it because I'm just trying to get your blood glucose up. So if my glucagon's not working and it's not breaking down fat, then it has to break down something else. So the only thing it can break down is muscle. And therefore it will break down skeletal muscle and break down cardiac muscle. The flow-on effect from that is that if you look at the alco, who's got really big gut because he's got non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and he's got all this adiposity, all this fat around his internal organs, they often have really skinny arms, skinny legs. You know a picture, and they've got cardiac troubles. And it may be that this chronic pathway, they're actually producing all this visceral fat, but their glucagon's been inhibited to the point of not actually being able to burn the fat. So it burns protein. The 2 other take-home messages from that is when this may be the benefit of that red wine. So people say, there's benefits in having red wine. I'm not actually advocating this, but nonetheless, you have some sugar and carbs through your meal, the Mediterranean diet, bread, rice, and pasta, vegetables. The blood glucose is going up, but there may be a anti-glucagon effect by having that glass of red wine with it may actually bring it back down. So it may you may have one coming up and the other one coming down, and it tends to be a stabilising. That's purely a theory. I think that whole message of glucagon is actually confirmed when you listen to people say, I couldn't lose weight until I dropped alcohol. I can't lose. So in my book, when people are trying to lose weight by doing low carb, as Uric Westman will say, they're not doing it. That's number one. So I think lots of people are trying it but not doing it right. The next one is portion size. I say what you need on your plate is the size of your fist. And most people have got 2 or 3 fist sizes on their plate. So A, it's either you're not doing it. B, it's portion size. C, it's alcohol. Or D, it's something strange. Never forget something strange. But I ask those 3 questions, that covers virtually everyone every time. So how much do you put on your plate? Well, do you drink alcohol? Okay. I've got a long story with that, but essentially, one of my colleagues was losing weight and his wife wasn't. And I said to her, look, I know you have a couple of glasses. Don't you take that away from me.
That's all I have. Yeah.
I have. I've got him and I've got 2 glasses of wine. I said, anyway, so cut a long story short, she came in a couple of months later and I said, you look great. She said, I hate you. I said, but you've lost 8 kilos. A few months later, she'd lost 14 kilos.
Nice.
And I told her she looked hot.
Yeah.
I then immediately got on the phone after she left my office. I rang Belinda and said, I've just told so-and-so she looks hot. And I rang up my colleague and said, I've just told so-and-so that she looks hot, just so clarifying that as I did actually say it.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. The only thing she changed and the only thing a lot of people changed is the alcohol. What I'm doing is I'm putting some biochemistry behind it.
Yeah.
And again, people don't want to know the biochemistry, because if the biochemistry is there and I'm right, then it means a lot of us have made a mistake for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry that I've plagued you with this talk tonight.
No, that was great. No,
I think it's really important to say sorry, because it's.
Well, there might be a lot of people saying, that you might have to say sorry too for taking away their alcohol, fruit, and honey.
I have never taken away anyone's food.
Yeah.
All you can do is give people the information.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. You took away people's food. I said, I've never done that.
Yeah.
It's just I don't. Yeah, I'll give you. I might point out all sorts of things about it. I actually might draw on your banana the percentage of sugar in it. Yeah. I've never taken it away. That's a great one. What's got more sugar in it, bananas or Coca-Cola?
That is a good question. I'm going to. Well,
Coca-Cola is about 10%.
Yeah.
Apples are about 10%. Bananas 16 to 24%, depending on how ripe it is.
Okay.
I said, there's a great line, people having a banana because they're trying to get their potassium. That's another myth. You can get potassium out of banana, okay? So there's much better ways of doing it. Mm-hmm. I said, well, why don't you just have Coca-Cola? I'm never going to drink that garbage. You're having more sugar in what you're eating there.
Yeah, exactly. Or the eating carrots for vitamin A, which doesn't exist in plants anyway. It's beta carotene. And something that I learned the other day, I found a couple of studies talking about this, but actually 45% of people cannot convert beta carotene into vitamin A. So they have to eat have to get retinol from animal sources, which sort of shows you the biological, our biological nature. 45% of people cannot get vitamin A, retinol out of beta carotene. So you literally, 50% of the population has to eat meat, right? And
I knew about the pathway, I didn't know the percentage, which is really, it's just interesting. But isn't it fascinating that we're still learning?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the, I haven't been excited by an orthopedic conference for at least 15 years, maybe 20. Maybe a couple I got up there and actually used the word negligence if you keep operating on people for the wrong reason. So I found that exciting, only because of all the knives being thrown at me.
Yeah.
But I don't invite trouble. I just invite truth. And unfortunately, they seem to come hand in hand.
Yeah.
As you well know, we've talked about this in recent times, and you don't even know sometimes why you're in trouble.
Yeah, well, it's just somebody gets upset about what you say, so they want to make trouble. That's usually it. And and for people that don't know, you were attacked quite maliciously by the medical board and the nutritional establishment in Australia, and they
and the press and social media, and as I said, my own hospital administrator was posting stuff on a web hate page about me. I mean, I'm not going to be. That's just what was happening. You go, and I wrote to the hospital and the Department of Health and APRA, the medical board, say you can't have the chief medical officer of your hospital writing defamatory stuff about you on social media, identifying himself. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And yet the system was allowing it. And I still don't get it, but finally common sense. And this is, I still every time get an opportunity to thank the people for actually getting me off. Because it's only the people's response, and they're getting that support from the community and the medical board being put under public pressure. Like the amount of people that wrote stuff on their pages and wrote to them and emailed them and whatever, it was there was a public outcry, which then took another couple of years before all that sorted itself out. But so social media is a powerful tool, can be used in multiple ways. And at present, whilst we still have the ability to have relatively free speech in this medium, we should keep going with this message.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, Gary, it's been an absolute pleasure. I don't want to monopolize your night. I know you have a roast going. So thank you so much for taking so much time to speak with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I do know that.
Yeah. And what are you up to now? What are your current projects, and where can people find you and find your work?
Most of the talks you'll find on YouTube. There are other talks floating around in different spaces. I'm on Twitter. I find it's the easiest space to be a bit naughty. Belinda took over my Facebook page some years ago because we just changed it from Gary Fettke, no fructose, and I just literally crossed the line and changed it to Belinda because APRA didn't have any jurisdiction over her. That's just pretty well the one finger extended mentality to the system. And I'm on Instagram, but I don't understand that. And people seem to track me down no matter how much I might try and hide here in Tasmania. So look, we believe in it. That's all. And in the passage of time, we might be proven wrong on several areas, but on the overall thing, I think we've seen the big picture of the jigsaw puzzle. We're on the right track.
Yeah.
People are filling in some of the spaces, the sky and the sea on it, but the overall big picture hasn't changed. And as you're just finding more information that just keeps supporting the fact that our way out of this is to eat fresh, local, seasonal, whole food. Yeah. And if you're going to do that properly, it's going to be predominantly animal-based. And it can be done. And I mentioned Peter's work. I think the fascinating thing is how much grassland we're not utilising on this planet. It's 20% of our land is potentially farmable in a respectful way without stripping it. Yeah. I think that there's hope for the future. Whether or not we're all here or not, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if we get our act together, then we will be, and other people will be as well. But I guess that's why we're doing this sort of thing, is to get the word out there and to sort of head off the strange agendas that seem to want us everyone sick and feeble and malnourished. So well done for fighting a good fight. I was sort of saying that just only last week when there was a fight occurring in a debate, I said we shouldn't use those terms. I'd like to, why can't we just keep discussing it? And here are the results. And one of our agendas, probably our agenda is Belinda and I, we've talked about this openly, what's our end game? We don't know what our end game is as we're still having fun. But we'd like to see that low carb is seen as a safe and viable option that should be supported for those people that wish to do it. And whether or not it's a little bit of low carb or it's a little bit less processed food or it's hardcore low carb, keto, carnivore, it should be seen as a safe option for those people that want to choose it. That's it. And let people make informed decisions not based on the supermarket advertising and the pharmaceutical industry, which has completely conflicted our medical profession into prescribing drugs over lifestyle. I almost said lifestyle medicine, but I didn't. Yeah, well, I fully agree with that. And, as long as people just understand what's out there and they're, like I said to people, I don't care if you smoke or drink. I just don't want you to smoke and drink because you think it's good for you. You think you're supposed to smoke and drink. and that's what people are doing now. They're eating the wrong things and they have no idea that they're wrong things. They're just being told one thing, and unfortunately it's the wrong thing. And I just want people to be, just to have a bit more information and be able to make the choice for themselves. And it sounds like you're in the same boat.
There's a few of us on it now. Hasn't sunk yet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's getting bigger too. We are starting to get more people on this. So that's always very encouraging. I was talking to Paul Mason. He was saying, what do you think? Do you think it's growing? I was like, I think it is. He's like, I think we're just in a bubble chamber, echo chamber. We're just talking to ourselves. But, I've seen people, patients. I've just been in the ED, just seeing, someone with a shunt dysfunction. And so with a VP shunt, and then I was talking to him, got him worked up. We're bringing him in the hospital for revision surgery. And I came back. I just forgot to ask him one thing, came back. And then all of a sudden he just goes, hey, can I ask you a question? Like, do you happen to just only eat meat? And I'm like, yeah, why do you ask that? And he's like, well, I actually follow you on social media. I've seen your videos. I really like them. I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. So, when random patients in the emergency department at 2 a.m., are starting to get the message, I think that's a good sign. I think that's a sign that people are starting to pay attention.
I come back to where we started here in Australia. As we can buy low carb beer. Yeah,
right.
And there are. I posted the other day about that. I happened to be in Kmart, and I went past the bookshelf and books for sale, and there was one keto cookbook. And beside it, there were a pile of vegan cookbooks which weren't selling.
Yeah, good.
So the fact is that and I recognise that the polarising topics, vegan, carnivore, vegan, low carb, keto. But the fact is that I think there's been a plateauing of the whole vegan vegetarian movement. Mm-hmm. And there's an escalate, I think one level's here and low carb, keto, carnivores doing this. And the only reason that it's doing that is it works.
Yeah.
The only reason it's doing that is it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And, I get it. And so we're not alone anymore.
Yeah, I think so. And what do you need a vegan cookbook for anyway? Just like take yard waste, put it in a bag. That's basically it. What are you cooking?
Well, what you're doing is intervening between the supermarket and the chookyard.
Yeah.
And I get it, but I'm just getting it, why don't you just go to the supermarket, buy all that for the chickens, or just let the chickens free range, which they do here, and they are mighty carnivores.
Yeah.
You find a mouse, you put a mouse in with a chookyard, whoa, you'll see them in carnivore action.
Yeah.
And if you let them free range, they keep the mouse population down.
Yeah. I did not know that, but that's kind of terrifying.
No, they're descended from T-Rex, most chickens.
That's it. Yeah.
And they'll eat the meat and they'll eat the worms and they'll scratch the ground looking for the bugs, and that's their primary food source, and the rest is all sort of.
Yeah.
Well, I heard the great description of hunter-gatherers. The people who go out hunting, if they don't get anything, they'll gather a bit of stuff on the way back.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
For survival, not for thriving. Eating to survive, eating to thrive, and one's an animal-based diet and the other one's plant-based.
Very true. Yeah, and even more recently than the dinosaurs, but they have on the last mass extinction when all the megafauna died out, we lost a lot of these giant 12-foot tall, giant carnivorous birds in South America and Central America.
And here in Australia.
Oh, really? Did you have some?
Monotremes, but essentially we had a whole lot of animals which were the size of an elephant.
Yeah, right.
Roaming the plains, and our ancestors hunted them out.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just rereading some stuff at the moment. I've great joy in reading Jared Diamond, who's written quite a few books. And I'm just reading I've got here, Guns, Germs and Steel. It's 25 years old, but essentially it's how we have all evolved, and culture has evolved based on our landmass, our latitude, slightly our longitude, but very much our periphery. So latitudes play. So, but essentially, it all comes back. We have evolved based on our food and our survival. Mm-hmm. We haven't evolved based on our beliefs.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's as I say, 25 years old, the book, but I went, gosh, it's just as relevant to read right now. So I found it the other day and went, I'm going to start reading that again.
Yeah.
And you know, but I'm now rereading it mm-hmm. with the knowledge of where I've been discussing, not arguing, for the last 15 years. Go, oh, okay, that makes a bit of different sense. It's a bit like you think about beta carotene, that 45% of people can't metabolize it. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. If you'd have told me that 10 years ago, I would have gone, not interested.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't understand the relevance of why you've even raised the question or raised the statement. Now I get it. I go, yeah, wow, that's a really interesting thing. I hadn't thought about it before.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. All right. Well, Gary, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been absolutely pleasure.
I think that the sad thing about this, Anthony, is that I'm going to go out to the kitchen and Belinda's going, I told you so that you would not finish in the time frame that you said.
Yeah, probably not.
No, but I now lose the bet. Okay. I said, no, we'll be finished in time.
Yeah, right.
Nope.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you didn't wager too much, and hopefully you enjoyed it as much.
One of the things I try not to do is I try not to wager on things that I might or I will definitely lose.
Good. That's a good philosophy.
Okay. Thanks for your time, mate.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
And so everyone, please go follow Dr. Fettke on Twitter and all his social media and watch his videos, because he has spoken about all these and much more in great detail with PowerPoint presentations and diagrams and things like that make things very, very clear.
And Belinda's work.
Absolutely.
Belinda Fettke, if you're on board with what you're doing, but you want to work out why everyone else isn't on board, her work is that.
Yeah, it's absolutely integral. I mean, she really cracked the case open on, I mean, you sort of think, oh, big food, they put out a bunch of industry funded research and things like that. So we sort of get that, but understanding the origins of actually the processed food industry, which started really in the religious sect with the Seventh-day Adventists, who then started Kellogg's cereals and all the other processed food things and sanitarium foods, and how they're still writing the curriculum and textbooks for nutritional students and lifestyle medicine doctors today. So it's very important to understand exactly who we're up against. And so, yeah, I encourage everyone to go there. And for everyone else, thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.